Once upon a time, a kind and beautiful princess named Snow White lived in a kingdom. Her stepmother, the queen, was vain and jealous of Snow White's beauty. The queen owned a magic mirror, and each day she would ask it, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror always replied, "You are, my queen." But one day, the mirror said, "Snow White is the fairest of them all." Consumed with jealousy, the queen ordered a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. However, the huntsman couldn't bring himself to harm Snow White, so he let her go and told her to run away. Snow White fled deep into the forest, where she found a small cottage belonging to 7 dwarfs. Tired and scared, Snow White knocked on the door and was welcomed by the kind-hearted dwarfs, who agreed to let her stay with them. Grateful, she helped them with chores and became their friend. The dwarfs warned her to be careful, especially of her stepmother, and not to talk to strangers. Meanwhile, the queen discovered through her magic mirror that Snow White was still alive and living with the dwarfs. Furious, she decided to disguise herself as an old woman and trick Snow White into eating a poisoned apple. Disguised, the queen found Snow White alone at the cottage and offered her the apple. Despite the dwarfs' warnings, Snow White took a bite, and immediately fell into a deep, death-like sleep. When the dwarfs returned, they were heartbroken to find Snow White unconscious. Believing her to be dead, they placed her in a glass coffin in the forest. Time passed, and one day, a prince who had heard of Snow White's beauty came across the glass coffin. Moved by her innocence and beauty, the prince kissed Snow White. Miraculously, the kiss broke the spell, and Snow White awoke. The prince asked Snow White to marry him, and she joyfully agreed. They returned to the kingdom and lived happily ever after. As for the wicked queen, when she asked her mirror who was the fairest, it once again said Snow White. In her rage, the queen was overcome by her own dark magic and disappeared, never to harm anyone again. And so, Snow White and the prince ruled their kingdom with kindness and joy, living happily ever after.